I was going to jump right into the joys of life, and I can't do that. And I guess that's one of the host stories about what it's like to try to come into the world, that there's always going to be snags. And I have to deal with some things that arose out of what I shared with you yesterday. One is an omission, and the other one, at least for me, is a hilarious mistake. So let me clarify these to begin with. And the first one that I want to begin with, and a number of you noted it here and noted it online, that stage 4 was missing. Okay, well, let us not leave out stage 4, please. Those of you on the download address that I gave you, they have the corrected sequence, and it hasn't been left out. And I guess I wasn't into wholeness. But anyway, this is stage 4. Stage 4 is at 16 degrees, and this is the building of the Ajna Center. And one of the things about the nature of the building of the Ajna Center is that it's this essential separation of body and mind. And it is the beginning of, I guess that's why I avoided it, it's the beginning of this ordeal of the very basis of a human design calculation, which is the personality and the design. And it's really an ordeal. I don't know how many of you have really contemplated what it actually means that when you're looking at somebody's body graph, that the only thing that you get to see that you know that that person experiences is what's in black. Everybody thinks who they think they are in terms of what's black in that design. And the great discomfort of being informed begins with the fact that more, in a sense, than half of you, because in the end, those two aspects become the whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, that this part of you that you know nothing about is deeply disturbing. And for most people in this life, it's one of the basic problems of being informed. It's that as much as you think you know who you are, you don't. You know a minor aspect in that sense of who you are. And this is the separation. But more than that, not simply the separation of mind and body, but the separation of something else. If you look at the way in which human design analysis and authority and strategy is taught, you will see that the authority of the form is in the body, and that the not-self rules the mind. And so this stage is also the beginning of this basic dichotomy in us, that the truth lies within our form, but our minds are not interested in that. Our minds are interested in anything else but that. And so you have this basic division. Yet it is the path of wholeness. My first joke about the so-called soulmate was, meet your design crystal, please. You want to fall in love with something, fall in love with your shadow. Fall in love with your tunnel. If you love the tunnels as much as you love the roads, everything's going to be wonderful. And it's not like the tunnels are so mysterious after all. All of us are aware of the red part of our design, because we learn about that from others who keep on reminding us that we're like that, even though we don't really think we are, until finally we accept it. Accepting your unconscious is an extraordinary step. It allows you to get to see that there is a chance for wholeness, and the chance for wholeness is that who you think you are is an illusion. And that who you are can only function as the wholeness of those two aspects operating correctly. So this stage, and basically what you're seeing in this stage, is that you have the Ajna Center being built. Remember, we had the disembedding of the monopole. And in the disembedding of the monopole, what happens is that the monopole stays in the G center, but the design crystal first waits in the throat, and then when the Ajna Center is built, it enters into the Ajna Center, where ultimately it's going to begin its process of guiding our development. And remember how important the throat center is in all of that, because this is the guiding of our metabolism. Okay, the next part, which I think is really wonderful. Where is it? Oh, here it is. This is great. At lunch here in the hotel yesterday, I was having a conversation with those of us that were sitting together, and I think it was with the luck. I started to talk about, I think we were talking about the 28th gate, and we got off on struggle and whatever, and I began to talk about how analysts don't really get the simple. You know, that they really think that these three channels between the root and the splenic system are really different. Well, yeah, they are. As a nuance. As a nuance. Same thing as the root to the emotional system. Yes, those channels are different. As a nuance. The pressure on the spleen, as an example, that pressure to be able to defend oneself, to be able to survive, to be able to deal with the basic fears, all of that pressure is the same. Yesterday, when we were looking at this stage, this is the 7th stage, this is memory, this is success or failure, I put all this in the context of looking for purpose in the 2838. Except this is not what it is. It's the 3254. I mean, it has, you know... Now look, let me describe how funny that is, because it gives me a chance to reveal a real interesting truth about analysis. The purpose of the 28th gate and the continuity of the way the root works to the spleen is that all you're looking at is 3 different kinds of purpose. You have collective purpose, and collective purpose is fulfilled through the establishment of the ability to be able to challenge the authority of patterns. So this is the purpose of the collective, to keep on challenging the patterns until the patterns are perfected. There is the purpose of the individual, which is where I was yesterday. And the purpose of the individual is to find true purpose in their lives. So I gave you that whole rap on following your strategy and being yourself. Good, you got that rap. But the reality is that that was just the personal manifestation of it. This is actually much deeper. Because you see, the purpose that's fulfilled here is the tribal purpose, and the great fear in the 32 is not personal failure. It's tribal failure. You know, I am only going to have a relationship with you if our offspring are really going to be worthy for the world they're going to meet. It's a totally different purpose. That's why the 32nd gate is the gate of the actual personnel manager. This is somebody that can really judge whether somebody else has the potential to fulfill ambition and to be able to move forward and transmit to the tribe and so forth and so on. So here in the 3254, and again, the memory, because when you're looking at the 3254, you're looking at something very, very deep. You're looking at the nose. This is all about the nose. This is all about the sense of smell. You know, the expression of somebody who can smell money, somebody who can smell success, somebody who can smell a rat. All of that smelling comes out of this stream of instinct. And of course, that smelling is our deepest memory. Deepest memory. The memory you have of being next to your mother's breast is a memory you will never ever forget, and it's just a smell. And anything that comes close to that smell, you want to nuzzle up against it. You know? It's how deep that memory is, and you don't know why. You don't remember that smell. It's just buried deep inside the smell of security. So you have a deep memory system that's here. And again, it's one of the things to understand about the spleen. The spleen is all about intelligence. It's about intelligence. We know that that intelligence is initiated out of fear of survival. But here in this stage, in stage 4, what you're getting to see is something more. You're getting to see that intelligence is not enough. My dog is smart. But my dog's puppies, if she ever has puppies, are going to start with the same disadvantage. They're going to start with the same disadvantage because they don't have transferable memory. I mean, hey, this is what makes us cool. You know, if you go back to Rome 2,000 years ago, you're not going to really see a city that's very different in terms of the basic mechanics of life in a complex environment. But oh boy, the amount of knowledge in the minds of the young, to compare then to now, it's absolutely extraordinary. And all about that is our ability to be able to store information. So that we're actually at a point now in the age that we live in, which is, you know, the amount of information that we have access to that is stored is unbelievable. It is there is more information on the Internet than all the human beings on Earth using the Internet 24 hours a day could consume. You know, there's so much information out there that's stored. This is our glory. The glory is here. Memory makes us even better survivors. And when you think about that biologically, you'll understand that if your immune system didn't have a memory capacity, you would always be at threat of death at any moment. Because it would not recognize bacteria coming in that it already had a defense system for, that it doesn't have to, suffer from, that it can immediately go out and attack because it recognizes it, because it's seen it before. So memory is an essential aspect of what it is to be human, and you can see that it is a transforming agent. This is the channel of transformation. And so the purpose of the tribe is fulfilled through tribal memory. Now take that to the extreme now and think about the tribes that are being placed under threat by the collective. And the tribal memory is the one thing they're trying to preserve. Let me preserve my rituals. Let me preserve my language. Let me preserve this. Let me preserve that. Trying to preserve the memory so it's not lost. And people are willing to die to defend that because it is the tribal way. So this is a different way of fulfilling purpose. I always like the moment when the fates, we have Uranus in the 30th gate. Whenever Uranus is in the 30th gate, the fates can always step into your life and change your track. And one of the things as people who have a deep knowledge of human design, to really appreciate that when you're looking at a body graph, you must never forget genetic continuity. Never. That lines are related to each other. That themes are related to each other, that streams are related to each other, that there are symmetries within this body graph, that there are dualities in this body graph, and that fundamentally they're all driving us towards very, very similar functions. They're just nuances. If you're busy fulfilling tribal purpose, you're different than somebody busy fulfilling personal purpose. Yet you're both doing the same job, out of the same instruments driving you. Okay, my corrections are done. We can now get born. And for all of you smart Alex in the virtual world who are aware of this and complain bitterly, I've now pleased you all. What about the head center? No, I didn't. First, let me get to where I'm going to, and then I'll answer your question. When you look at this illustration, which is stage 10, this is illustration 16. When you're looking at this, what you can see in the background there, which is there throughout, is this potential of the head center. Obviously, at this stage, we do not have a head center because there is no readiness for the arrival. Let me change that to make more sense out of that. I demonstrated to you yesterday. I gave you this equation, this binary equation, where you have 88 degrees of the developmental stage of building the framework. You have 88 degrees at the closing stage, and in between you have this interregnum that moves. For example, we have children that are being born very, very, very early, and this interregnum is being squeezed and squeezed. It is when you get beyond this stage that the head center is available. But the head center is there as an infrastructure, but it doesn't function until that moment that the personality crystal comes in. So that's why it's not discussed in this way. In other words, it's sitting there now waiting. And from the moment that this program is finished, in other words, the moment that a fetus can get through the first 88 degrees, then there's an opportunity for that fetus to actually come to term. Because that's the moment that the infrastructure is built, and that's the moment that it's ready and could accept a personality crystal when the personality crystal comes in. Okay. Okay, let's get to the business of coming into the world. I finished yesterday asking all of you to really pay attention to the importance of birth data. this program that I'm working on now, that my plan is to dedicate the next 7 years of my life to teaching the Global Incarnation Index. The thing for me that's very clear is that even by offering the opportunity for people to have calculations down to base level, that if you don't have accurate time, it really is a pointless exercise. For some people, that will be a kind of tragedy, but then again, what to do? It's very important that there is good birth time. I'm very lucky I have that from my children, so I have this ability to be able to go down and look at their base. I'm lucky myself in that I was premature and my mother actually dictated the time of my birth, so I know, roughly speaking, within a very thin arc what my base is. These calculations are very important. So when we start with the birth process, I want you to understand that this is the surface of differentiation. And this is one of the basic principles of understanding what a human-designed body graph is. And I cannot stress this enough to you. You have to understand something about us. We are so similar to each other. I mean, we are a common species. If you look at our genetic material, we are so similar to each other. Human design isn't about looking at our similarities. It's about noticing our differentiation. What makes us different? My illustration of that is a very simple one. If you look at any given cell, if you go down into the nucleus of that cell will carry all the DNA of whatever the life form is. So if I take a cell, I scratch off a single cell from the surface of your skin, and I look down into the nucleus of that cell, what I'm going to see is your entire potential, your entire DNA strand. And yet that cell doesn't make you. I mean, that DNA doesn't instruct the cell to be you. It just instructs the cell to be a skin cell. And for us to understand that when you're looking at the matrix of the body graph, what you're looking at is the genetic code. And when you're looking at your activations, what you're looking at is those differentiations. And instead, you're a skin cell and you're a blood cell, you're a generator and you're this and you're that, and this is your differentiation. And so when you're looking at a body graph, what you're looking at is what makes us different. You also have to see something. There is no empty spaces in that graph. Everybody spends their time looking at a body graph and saying, wow, that's white, or open, or empty, or whatever language they end up using. But it's not. Sometimes it is. I mean, after all, that is frozen in space. And if you take literally the body graph and you look at it, and you see that you only have certain amino acids, you only have certain things that are permanently activated in your design, if you don't have the others, you have no right to be alive. You should be dead. It's not like we don't have the others. You know what we call the rest of it that we don't have activated? We call it not self. Because it's us as well. We have everything. But we don't have everything all the time. We have some things all the time. That's the true self. That's our definition. But everything is there. It's something very important to grasp. In other words, it is not possible for us as a species to live without our species. It's not possible for us. We are a bio-whole. And when you come into the world and you come in with a specific configuration, you come in with a basic trial in this life. I mean, when you're looking at a human being and you're looking at them coming into the world, what you see immediately is three things. You see the personality. And the personality is who they think they are. Now take a look at this design. If you look at this design, you'll see that the throat center is connected to the G center. It's connected through the channel 8-1. The creative role model, it's an individual gate. It is a projected element. It is all about projecting outwards somebody's readiness to make a contribution. These are people that the only way in which they can feel correct in their role is if they're making an individual contribution. And so this person at some level, at that level of their split, is always calling for the recognition that they can make a contribution. Now, if you tell that person that, they will nod their head. You know, this is the obvious nod. Yes, that's me. I know that's me. I know that's me because that's who I think I am. And it's who I think I am because that's what's in black. And that's what I have conscious access to. Yes, that's me. Okay. And then you go down in their graph and you can see that there is their generator. We'll talk about that in a moment. You can see that there is a definition between the root to the sacral. This is a format energy. Format energies are very powerful. This is an abstract format energy. It means that this person is a cyclical being. They have to go through cycles in this life. And you can see that the 42nd gate, which is the gate of being able to actually bring things to completion, is unconscious. This person has a conscious aspect on the other side. The other side, the 53rd gate, is about beginnings. So if you say to this person, hey, you're really great at starting things, they go, yeah, I could be. Yeah, I am. And then you say to them, but you're also great at finishing them. And they say, what, me? Nah, that's not true. That's not who I am. I'm not that. And it's one of the first things to recognize about coming into the world, because nobody's standing there with a flow chart in front of you saying, hey, look, baby, you know, you got these black things over here. That's who you think you are. It's just an illusion. You know, don't get carried away. It's a little bit of who you are. You know, it's the part of who you are that's easy for you always to know. But if you trust that, you're a lunatic, you know? And of course, the vast majority of humanity is running around trusting their personality. Now, when this person trusts their personality and doesn't pay any attention to their lower definition because they don't really have access to it, then you're going to have somebody that's only going to meet resistance. You're going to have somebody who's going to be very frustrated, and you're going to have somebody who isn't going to get recognized. It's as simple as that. And they're running around saying, yes, but I know I can make a contribution. Yes, I know I can. That's me. Well, that's only you if the contribution is something that you can get involved with and go through the whole process with it and complete the process. Otherwise, there's no sense in making a contribution. There's no sense in just starting to make a contribution. And you're only going to know that when you enter into things correctly as yourself. Blah, 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 blah. So the first thing is that you come into the world and you have a fixed personality. And it's who you think you are. Everybody. But you also come into the world with all of those red activations. And when you come into the world with all those red activations, those are your traits. Traits. You know, it's the kind of thing you only discover after years of seeing it pop up. Eventually, this person, if they're lucky enough to enter into things correctly, you know, somebody asks them something, you go, uh-huh. They enter into the right thing and they discover that they can go through it to the end. You know, and I think, wow, that's great. But they don't think they did it. It's not like I was able to bring it to the end. It was like, wow, aren't I lucky that I had this person and that person, and we were able all together, and they're split after all. They could become very dependent on the other. You know, they could bring them to that without recognizing it's them. But if it happens enough over their lifetime, and then somebody says to them, you know, you are somebody that's here to finish things. You just don't have an immediate identification with that. And they go, yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that now in my life. I didn't think I was like that, but now I can look back and I can see, yeah, that's just what I'm like. But when somebody comes into the world, they don't have that advantage, nor do they have the referencing. So much of my work in working with adults is that they can reference their unconscious to past experience. And they can immediately identify with these traits. And the moment that you can accept your traits, along with the recognition of what your personality is, you're ready to confront the not-self. We are all of it. We are all of it. You know, there's this myth about the innocence of babies. I do not go along with this myth. They're very sweet when they come into the world, but they carry a design. And their parents are not self. And the fetus was conditioned before it was even in the world. And the moment that it's in its own space, it's not only conditioned by its environment, but by the planetary motion and the whole program as a whole. And everything about the way in which the human mental plane is defined is that the human mental plane is defined by the grasp of the not-self on the mind. You really have to understand how the not-self works. For many years, I was very resistant to teach the not-self. It was like I was teaching the enemy rather than teaching people the true self. I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to, try to just see what they are rather than the complexity of the not-self, because the not-self is deeply complex. See, when I began to teach or introduce design, or any teacher that's here who is teaching design, we all teach the same basic principle about the nature of a center. That a center that is open, though it is the source of what we call conditioning, that once we transcend that is, once we're no longer a victim of the conditioning of that center has a potential for wisdom. In other words, what is open in us becomes a filter through which we can ascertain, discern, look at, and make sense out of what is not us. It's a great wisdom. Yet one of the things to realize about the nature of mind is that mind is built on not-self strategies. And that those not-self strategies, which basically limit the way the mind perceives things, is that those not-self strategies don't disappear when you wake up. They don't. I know. They don't. You see, we have a basic dilemma. We cannot survive at this level of consciousness without being totally absorbed on the mental plane. We cannot. This is our world. We live on the mental plane. It's just the way it is. And that the mental plane is deeply, deeply, deeply seductive. The thing to recognize about strategy is that strategy, because it's limited to the mechanics of the form, that strategy is the only thing that can compete with the mind trying to control your inner authority. Everything about being an analyst in design, everything about teaching people human design is about recognizing and honoring the authority within you, which is never your mind. The mind is about outer authority for the other, not inner authority for the self. So look, let's take the example of this chart. When you're looking at this chart, you're looking at somebody that has 5 open centers. They come into the world with 5 open centers. That means that their mind is going to be based on a configuration of not-self strategies rooted in those open centers. Not only that, but 3 of those 5 open centers are awareness centers. There is no more deeper conditioning than in open awareness centers. Very deep conditioning. And when you're looking at the awareness centers, there is a hierarchy. In other words, the deepest conditioning is in the solar plex. It's a motor. That's followed by the mind, and then finally by the splenic system. And any other open center follows in that hierarchy. Now, I'm talking about the way in which your mind, that you're going to live with all your life no matter what, the way your mind is designed to work. Okay, so let's look at the first priority. The first priority of this baby coming into the world, in terms of the way its mind is going to work, is avoid confrontation and truth. This is the first priority of this baby's mind. It is the first thing this baby's mind is going to think about. You think about that. That's quite something. And I'm not talking about the way in which your mind works, obviously. It's an adult mind. It's developed. The concepts are developed. Obviously, there is no It's a very, very early conceptual field. But you have to remember that the open emotional system is taking in the emotional wave of the environment around it. That this baby, from the moment that it comes into the world, is going up and down on the emotional wave around it. That this baby can be disturbed by its mother being upset or exhausted or, it is very, very difficult for many women to go through the first 9 months after the pregnancy. They can be easily exhausted, they can lose their temper, all these kinds of things. If they're emotional, half of all women are, as half of all men are, then the reality is that the baby is going to go through the emotional sequence. And so the very first thing developing in this baby's mind as a strategy, not a concept, is don't make waves. Don't make waves. And then Mama says, hey, this is such a sweet baby. And the baby's already lying to you and it's 2 days old. And everybody thinks babies are innocent. The not-self strategy is so profound. You see, our minds, the way our minds work. I have 4 open centers. My mind is all about those 4 open centers. Nothing else. That's what it's about. It is the framework through which I think. And it all started as not self-strategy, not healthy. I know the difference. Remember that what's happening in this child as this child matures is that mental strategy becomes a theme. I've described the child goes to school, has a bad incident at school, gets emotionally polluted by somebody, goes through the experience of going up and down in the wave and feeling uncomfortable, comes back into the house, and the child's mother says, how was school today? That child is not going to say it was awful. It's not. Its mental strategy is avoid confrontation and truth. Get out of the way of the poison. If I tell my mother the same story, I'm going to live through the same thing all over again. And then if my mother gets upset, I got her poison on top of it. And on and on and on. And then she'll tell my father, and he'll be infuriated. And then I got even more of that poison in me. I don't want to tell anybody. And it started when the child came into the world, and this is the number one priority of its mind. And will be its number one priority for the rest of its life. So every time somebody sits down beside me, in the old days, when I did readings, and they had an open emotional system, what do you think I saw? Day one. First day in the world, their mind is fixed on avoid confrontation and truth. Oh, how sweet it was for me, the great shocker, to just smack them. Give them every truth I could possibly give them. And they were actually paying for the confrontation. But you really have to see that the not-self transforms us. Okay, so looking here. The next thing to look at is the open ajna center. When you're looking at the open mind, think about the dilemma of the open mind. The open mind is never fixed. So when you have somebody that has an open ajna center, there's only one thing they want to avoid in life. They want to avoid being made a fool of. It's the most important thing for them. They'll go to any lengths, not to be made a fool of. Which means that conceptually what they will do is that they will tie their string to some concept and hold on to it for dear life. Because that way they won't be made a fool of. Now think about a child that comes into the world with an open ajna center. It doesn't want to be made a fool of. It starts believing in things, understanding things the way it's conditioned around them, and then pretends that that's what they really think. No matter what. It's one of the most frightening aspects for me of the nature of the world that we live in, that there are so many human beings on this planet who pound the desk with their concepts, and they've got open ajna centers, and damn well it doesn't mean anything. Nothing. So you've got a child that the first thing that's happening is that its mind, its first priority is avoid confrontation and truth, And its second priority is, in order to avoid confrontation and truth, pretend that you agree. The world's flat. Yeah, sure it's flat, honey. Good. That's great. No problem with that. Yeah. You want to think the earth's flat? That's great. You want to shoot junk? That's great. I shoot junk on a flat earth. It's okay with me. It's all right. Everything's okay with me. Yeah. I agree with you philosophically. I agree with your politics. I agree. I go along with that. And most of you know my sense of humor by now. I sort of push that a bit, but you really have to see that is the reality. Undefined ajna centers, to avoid being made a fool of, will pretend that they understand or know or believe things. And to the point that they fool themselves. Because after all, they're doing it to protect themselves from truth and confrontation, which is an even a greater priority for them. And then you get to their open spleen. And the strategy of the open splenic system is to hold on to things that aren't good for you. So you hold on to lousy concepts that aren't good for you in order to avoid confrontation and truth. You hold on to people who aren't good for you simply because you don't want to be made a fool out of them and have to deal with the confrontation and truth. And most of all, you hold on to people because you don't want to feel insecure. And because you don't want to feel insecure, you pretend that you're certain in order to avoid the confrontation and truth. And this is not waiting for somebody to flower into messed up adulthood. This is already the condition of the developing mind of that child. Already. The children that get abused the most on this planet are open splenic children. If you have an undefined splenic system, you are deeply, deeply vulnerable to a sense of lack of well-being. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that you're walking around saying, I don't feel good. Is that what's going on at the deepest level within you is that you're insecure. It's actually your immune system saying, I feel insecure. I don't seem to be working all the time. This is the whole thing about an inconsistent system. And so what the undefined splenic system does is that any spleen will do. Well, it is true. You got one? We'll start auctioning them at Jovian. Want a spleen? I've got a son who's a 59-6. I was going to offer him as a fertility god. You park him in the bedroom next to yours and, hey, you can have children, you got a problem. Anyway, we'll leave all that alone. Open splenic system. If you have an open splenic system, you're going to end up holding on to a spleen. So let's say that spleen belongs to your father, and your father is a rapist. Just to be an extreme, but it's not that extreme. And so you have this child that has an open spleen, and you've got a parent that is going to abuse the child, and that child is not going to tell anybody. Because that child is going to hold on to what isn't good for it in order to avoid confrontation and truth and so forth and so on. You can't imagine how powerful that is. And whether the abuse is as radical as that, or the abuse is verbal abuse, whatever it happens to be, you've got a parent in your life, that trashes you, you'll actually put up with that. The worst thing that parent can say to you is, go to your room. Get out of my aura. Then are you ever going to feel insecure? And you'll do anything to avoid being sent to your room. So you'll agree to stupid concepts in order to placate the stupid parent, in order to avoid the confrontation and truth, to grow up to be somebody that's useless that we have to fix. And it starts the moment you come into the world. I guess it's also fast. But you know, yesterday when I was talking at the very beginning about the nature of crystal bundles, I talked about the fact that those of us who incarnate, that's our job. And that we are a very tiny minority of the consciousness field. We are specialists in a very, very, very tough business. This is a very tough business coming into form. You know, the idea of awakening somebody. When I go through a drama like this where I take a look at the whole movie and I see all the cards stacked against you, it's like, tough game. Tough game. I mean, it's hard enough just to get into one of these boxes and write it out, let alone that you actually try to transcend it. You know, there's almost an arrogance to that because it's so tough right from the beginning. And you see, this is the specialness of our mental capacity. It's really to be grasped. The level of this conversation, you know, is a level that penetrates all that, finally. You know, so that we try in our way to simplify this so that we do give those who have the game against them a chance. I'm more interested in teaching parents so they'll look after their children than anything else, and I've been that way from the beginning. Because I realize that, you know, with adults, it's always so late. You know, you've been living out this bullshit for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, and it's the hardest thing to just get past it. You know, and while you're struggling to live out your true self, there's that not-self mind of yours that's been operating that way all of your life. And it's not like it's saying, hey, good for you, you're waking up. It isn't. It's saying, hey, I don't want to lose my authority here. I'm in charge here. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And you know. You really have to grasp what it is, what a challenge it is for us. And at the same time, what's possible. Because it's possible. That's the magic. It's possible. Because there are mechanical truths. You know, mechanical truths are the only way that you can deal with all of this stuff. It doesn't make any difference if I tell this person, hey, look, you avoid confrontation and truth. They go, yes, so? You think just because they know that and they agree, they're going to stop it? That's like a psychologist telling you that you're afraid of heights. And you go, yeah. Yeah, and? Well, what do you want me to do? Well, you know, we got to get rid of that fear of heights. Hey, I'll admit I have the fear. But what do you mean you're going to get rid of it? You know, you have to see that the not-self is so deep inside of us. I have an open solar plex. I was born and conditioned to avoid confrontation and truth. I would come home from school and my mother would ask me if I had a good day and I didn't tell her that I dropped acid, you know, that I fucked my teacher and that I was really having a good life. You know? I didn't do that. I said, have a nice day. You know? Avoid confrontation and truth. Period. Now think about it. I'm an ego manifester. I'm here to inform, right? And I happen to sit at the head of an organization. And sometimes I have to make statements, right? And so I sit down and I say, well, who do I tell? Who do I inform? And immediately my solar plex jumps into my head. And it says to me, maybe we should have tried to avoid a little bit of confrontation here. Maybe they should find out secondhand, you know? And the other side of that is me going, I don't need to tell that person because that person doesn't really need to know this. Now, that is always there. You understand? I never have been able and will never be able to get rid of my not-self, because if I got rid of it, I'd be a dummy. I mean, all of this intelligence would have been wasted, gone, lost. Look, I have an open head center. Right? Now the problem with an open head center is that 70% of humanity are thinking about things that don't matter. Right? That's what the open head center does. It thinks about things that don't matter. I got an open head center. Okay. I have an open root. The open root is you're in a hurry to get rid of the pressure. Okay. I'm in a hurry to get rid of the pressure of all of these things that don't matter. Which is why I sell it to you. You know? And I get rid of it. There it goes. And in that way, I help you avoid confrontation. And find some, and on and on and on. It's all a game. But you see, the moment that my mind stopped being my inner authority, that the very way in which my mind was conditioned by my open centers becomes my real wisdom. Now that's a tricky ground. Because you see, as long as I'm honoring my intuition, I'm safe. Because that's my authority. The moment that my mind is actually making that decision, I'm in big trouble. But every single time I'm in that situation, I can hear my not self saying, hey, shit, come on, I got one more chance to be in control of your life. You know, give it to me now. Let me tell you who not to inform. Let's avoid some confrontation. You know? I mean, when I'm sitting at the computer and I'm doing something, I have an open sacral center. Now, the open sacral center, the not self strategy is you don't know when enough is enough. Right? So I could sit at that computer until I die. No, I mean, I'm just there. And in that moment where I realize that I may be fatiguing, you know, I can immediately hear my not-self mind jump in and go, hey, it's not enough. Come on, baby, we got the juice. This is fun. Let's keep on going. You know, it's a great night. You know, let's be... And I know I can hear it. And I go, yeah. I know. Oh, boy, do I know when enough is enough now. Because I know from my intuition. And when my intuition tells me close it, I close it. And it tells me to close it. And it just does, period. But you have to see that when you come into the world, nobody's there to guide you and teach you. Now, we have it. Now it begins to happen. You know, where children are being treated according to their nature so that, you know, you see that. I'm so aware of the fact I have 2 sons with open head centers and open ashnas. I don't want them to think the way I think because it makes them feel like, you know, they're safe that way. You know, you have to be aware of these things. Okay, so when we're looking here, we looked at the first 3 open centers. Now, let's get to the killer, the knife, the stake in the heart. If you've got an open head center, the gods don't like you. I really should be careful about the things I say, shouldn't I? But anyway, they don't. They don't. It's like, you're coming in again? Ha ha ha. We have something for you. We have an open heart center. Ta-da! I mean, nothing makes human beings sicker than an open heart center. Nothing. The strategy of the open heart center is, I have to prove my worthiness. Oh my God. You know? I have to prove how worthy I am. Worse than that, I have to improve myself. You know, the improvement movement. You know? Whether you go to the cosmetic surgeon or, you know, you take yoga or God knows what. Anyway, on and on and on. This person has an open heart center. And what you know about this person is that they're going to spend their whole life trying to prove that they're worthy. Now think about what that means. Remember that I'm not talking about how their life works. I'm talking about the way their mind is going to condition them to think. To think. So this person, somebody says to this person, would you like to do this? Whatever the this is. Think about the way this mind is already working. First of all, the emotional. Well, if I say no, they're going to get pissed off, and then I got to deal with their wave, and oh shit, I don't want to have that. I'm going to avoid that confrontation. I'm going to tell them, yes, I'll do it. Okay? Not only that, the mind jumps in and says, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, why not? It seems like it's an interesting concept. Let's go along with it. You know, the splenic system says, yes, 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 yes. You know, let's hold on to this one and give it a try. And the ego comes in and says, we have to do this. We have to prove to everyone that we can do this. And even though we hate this, and we hate this son of a bitch, and we hate the job, and we hate the money, and we hate the work, and we hate it all, we're going to prove our worthiness. Ta-da! And you see, that starts when they're a day old. I'm going to prove to you that I'm the nicest, quietest little baby, and you're not going to know there's anything wrong. It already starts. So I can prove to you how worthy I am. You know, think about this planet. Think about the vibration of this planet. Think about all these gung-ho jerks all over this planet who unfortunately are armed. I mean, they're armed. You know, running around, oh, prove it. You know, let me prove my worth. You strap that bomb on me. Give me a break. Well, who else but an undefined ego would blow themselves up on a nice day? You know? You don't do that if you've got a defined ego. You want to live? I mean, dying doesn't prove anything. What does dying prove? Only an undefined ego could rationalize that dying proves their worthiness. I mean, it's the insanity of the not-self mind. It's just insane. And everybody calls it normal because everybody lives it. Can you imagine what it would look like if we did not self-analyses of politicians? You know, I have a great collection for a course I'm doing on keynoting, where I do an analysis of the Dalai Lama. It's hilarious. See the difference between the true self and the not-self. And that not-self mind, you know what it does to us. It's the framework of the way in which we think. That's all of them, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, well, I left out the head center, but of course this person does think about things that don't matter. Well, imagine that. 70% of humanity. Only 30% of humanity have a defined head center. Not self-mind keeps us occupied and away from the truth. Everybody's thinking about shit that doesn't matter. When I started today with my very funny mistake, we came to the 3254 and we came to memory, and I talked briefly about the significance of memory for us as Homo sapiens, how different that memory makes us. It's something to understand. Human beings are designed to be the best educated offspring that have ever, 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 ever existed. And they are. They are now. But the reality is that we have to perfect the education of our young. You know, for me, the basic understanding of one's nature is a right. It's a right. Everybody has a right to know their design. Everybody has a right to be treated with respect according to their nature. And every child has the right to be raised according to their nature. And it's an essential ingredient. Otherwise, we're not going to have human beings that are really healthy, awake human beings. And it's accessible. And it's not about them going through 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of being messed up in order to get to a point, because it happens to be on their fractal, that they get a chance to see that there's a better way to be in this world. They don't have to deal with those questions. They can simply be correct. When the parent understands the nature of the child, in April of 2004, in the Ibiza event here, I'm going to be offering a course, the first time I offer a certificate course for analysts that is just about childcare. In other words, how to be able to give parents information that helps them to be able to guide and raise their children through the first half of the Saturn cycle. In other words, until the child is approximately 14 years of age. It's one of the most important things for us in our work. I've been deeply grateful over the years for the number of mothers that I've worked with who, from their feedback alone, I could sit back and feel good for the rest of my life. The value to parents of what this knowledge means in terms of raising your children is extraordinary. I know that from my own experience with my own children. So one of the things to recognize is that in my setting this out this way, my role is to show you the negative side of this slate so you really understand the fundamental handicaps of being unaware. But also to recognize that our spiritual development demands that we provide the best possible education for our young. And that means not so much what we teach them, but how we raise them, how we deal with them. All of this is at the basic tribal level of humanity. And remember something, only the tribe can change humanity. The collective cannot change the tribe as much as it wants to unless it annihilates it completely. And that's been tried before, and it doesn't work very well. Genocide is not something that's normally successful. The collective cannot defeat the tribe. It can try to transform the tribe through education. But only the tribe can transform itself, and when the tribe is transformed, everything is transformed. Everything. And it's something to understand about our basic processes, is that only within the tribal context, what we are as families, as communities, as educational providers, that we are the ones that have to make the difference. In the subculture that I've lived in for over 20 years here in Ibiza, everybody was conscious of get the birth data. I mean, they were all basically had a background with astrology and mystical things and whatever. And there was a commonality of recognition that, a certain piece of data is important. And in the years before human design, when the friends of mine who were astrologers, when they would talk about, you could see this or that or these things about the children or whatever, you could see the potential of what it means when a community brings a consciousness into flowering. Everything about transforming society is about operating at the very basic tribal level. A freak like me can come in and bring mutation. But it's only the tribe that can transform that mutation into a way of life. And everything that I've seen over the years with design families, with parents that are aware of design, with children who are conscious of it, is a deep transformation in the relationship within those families, a positive transformation. And this is one of the major parts of this work. My point in all this is that this child comes in with a handicap if it's not going to be treated according to its nature or educated to a level in which it's going to be beneficial for this child. If it doesn't receive those things, you can already see that from day one it's got a specific mindset. That mindset is there, and by the way, it's going to be reinforced over and over and over again by everyone that activates those open centers and pumps them up and pulls it away and pumps it up and pulls it away and on and on. And slowly but surely, this child's mind is going to be a perfect synthesized expression of their not-self. And then in order to break through that shell and to be able to find the true self that's there, well, you know what that process is like. It's not an easy process. Not everybody gets there. Not everybody gets to make it. So it's the first thing to keep in mind about this being. Obviously, when a baby comes into the world, it's not as if, you can start showing it body graphs and teach it human design. It's not going to work. And I don't do that with my own children. And I don't even pay much attention to it in terms of it being a direct educational process. I don't. I wait for them to respond. They're generators. If they're interested in something, I respond for them. But the reality is that the difference is how you raise them. How you raise them. This is a generator child. First thing. Pure generator. Pure generator that's here to operate correctly through cycles. Pure generator. Has the channel of maturation. here to go through a very regular, progressive program in their life. Somebody who's deeply able, in the end, to transform many people around them. And as a pure generator, this is a child that is designed to be asked. Asked. It's so simple. You know, you don't stuff the nipple in their mouth. You ask them if they want it. You know, you bring it close enough for them to respond to. And right away you start them on a different track. Oh, you have no idea what respect actually means. It's an astonishing thing to treat people according to their nature. It's not like each and every moment of that experience is, you know, a flash of recognition. It's about the sum total of that process. With my children, I ask them. I often have to ask them endlessly. You know, clean up your room. Could you clean up your room? Could you clean up your room? Could you clean up your room? And every once in a while I do explode, because what to do? But the reality is that you start off with respect. And to recognize that what that respect does is that it hones into the true nature of that being. And the true nature of that being recognizes it, even if their consciousness doesn't. I want my children. I have 3 generators. I want my children always to recognize that life will come to them. Always. Always. And it's what I teach them. And it's how I treat them. That it's there. They're here to be asked. They're here to be honored for what they are. And the moment that you treat that child that way from the beginning, it's so simple. It's not like that's complex. Asking your child is not complex. You know, it's one of the things that the birth of a generator child is here to teach humans that our children are not property. You know, children have very few rights. They are generally not protected. In most countries, you can beat your child half to death and nothing will happen to you. They're your property. They have no individual legal rights. None. Only thing that protects children in most places are institutions. The reality is that the child is not something that is honored. And their individual rights are not respected. And the first thing to see is that no, this is not property. This is a fractal. You know, this is just somebody there on your track. And at the moment that they come in, you can see by their very design that they come in with all of their equipment. They come in with their cross. They come in with their purpose. They come in with a mind that's already ready to be not self. They come in with the whole package. And at the moment that you treat them according to their nature is the moment that they are going to resonate in their relationship to you. And it's the moment that you're going to open up the potential for them. You can see something else about a child like this. You know right away that this child wants to avoid confrontation and truth. You know that this child is going to be sensitive to the emotional wave. So if you're an emotional parent and you're in a cranky state, stay away from your kid. You know? Don't give it the blast. You don't have to. You can be aware of what the impact is. You can be aware that your child is insecure and needs your security, and needs reliable security that isn't threatening. You don't have to tell little Johnny or Jane to be like you, to think like you. You know, I have a son who's fascinated with religion. It makes me squeamish. You know? And he's like, You know? You know, he never had any of that. And he comes from all kinds of religions in his blood. And, you know, He's interested in all that. I can't lay my trip on him. I can't do that. You know, he asks me this and that. I give him as objective an answer as I can, and I leave it alone. And he knows that he's allowed to whatever. You know, it's his open mind. He's going to do his trip. But he doesn't have to feel that he's a fool because he doesn't conceptualize it the way I do so that he repeats verbatim my trip. It's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. See, me personally, I have never cared what anybody thinks. You know, I mean, if God wanted to have a conversation with me, I wouldn't be interested. Really, I'm not that kind of person. I don't really care. You know, if somebody wants to think this about me, or that about me, or this about that, or that about that, hell's the difference. I don't care. But you see, I have a fixed mind. I have a certain kind of design. You come into the world with an open mind. You're very conscious of that. You're very conscious of the fact that, you know, I better think like this. Otherwise, they're going to think I don't know, or I don't understand, or it's so simple to look at your child, to look at a human being, to look at their open centers and understand how they work. I mean, hey, think about your own charts right now. You know? You think about your own charts. You think about your minds and the way your minds work and what the priorities are for your mind. And you'll see that everything that you're doing in this life is being guided by that conceptualizing methodology based out of those open centers. And it doesn't go away. The only thing that saves you is that you give inner authority to where it belongs. It's the great beauty of what it is to be a generator, is that inner authority is something very easy to find. It's very easy to find. But it's a lot easier to know and understand that authority if you learn that as a child than it is when you try to do that as an adult. You know, it's one of my... I'm a fifth-line profile, so irony is always there for me. And it's one of the great ironies for me because one of the things that actually gave me the courage to go out into the world in the late 80s and begin to talk about this knowledge was that I assumed that if I could meet enough generators, I could wake them up. And right away. And I really didn't give enough respect to the power of the not-self. How profound it is. That no matter how simple the jump might be. The reality is that not-self mind, wow, is that not-self mind ever tough. It hangs right in there and it doesn't want to give up its inner authority. It doesn't want to give up controlling your life. And you know, you can't get rid of it. It's always there. My mind is always operating through those open centers. It's always processing that way. Now, as long as I'm honoring my splenic authority, I'm fine, and that process for me becomes my wisdom. But oh boy, is that a fine line, folks. Is that ever a fine line? You better be right there in yourself. Because it's a very, very, very fine line. Okay. So we come into the world, and when we come into the world, not only do we have a generator, a pure generator, but we have a split definition. Jerks like me, that is single definition ego manifestors, made a lot of the rules in life, unfortunately for everybody else. And single definitions make the rule that you should be able to ingest and digest everything instantaneously. You know, that's the single definition rule. The manifestor rule is go do it right away. The ego rule is do it right away and you'll get some kind of competitive value from your victory. You know, it's really this push, push, push. If you're a split definition, you don't operate with the same frequency. Everything about the way in which what I call digestion, which has nothing to do with food digestion, but the ability to digest so that you can reach a point of clear decision making. If you take the example of this chart, if you imagine this chart without the defined throat G, in other words, if you just had the sacral connected down to the root, then it would be very, very easy for this person to be a follower of single definition propaganda. In other words, that's what they would be. Single definition, you ask them a question, do you love me? They go, uh-huh, everything's perfect. I mean, it's a pure response, it's right there, it's there in the now, there's no conflict. That's the perfect frequency. However, if you're a split definition, like this one, and you ask that split definition, do you love me? And they go, uh-huh, we got a problem here. We do. We do. Yes, we can trust that response to a point. In other words, in that response, what the sacral to the root is saying is that answer. The sacral to the root, which is the definition, is saying, yes, yes, I love you. I love you because I see that we can go through the whole cycle together. You know, that's the logic out of that sacral. You know, I love you because we'll go through the whole cycle. However, the individual throat G has not been a part of that decision. The individual throat G doesn't care too much about what the sacral is going to go to. Because the sacral is going to go to a collective experience, and the throat wants to show off its individual attributes. So when the sacral goes, the G center is going, what? Really? Now? Again, it doesn't mean that that may not be the truth, but there is no wholeness in the answer. And wholeness is a frequency that you have to get to. You have to attain that. You have to become whole. Now look, the person that asks this person if they love them may be joining that split and forming the bridge. And in that moment, in the illusion of that, this person can go, and go along with it. But what I want you to understand is that according to your nature, you have a different frequency. Everybody has a different frequency, and it's not a punishment if it takes you more time to say yes than somebody else. It simply means you're going through a different process, and that process has a quantitative and a qualitative value. If you're a split definition, you always need to step into a public environment where you can be private in order to test the frequency of your wholeness. You've got to find your wholeness without it being something conditioned directly by somebody who wants something from you. It's a key. So this person is never really going to know anything spontaneously that they can trust spontaneously. That's why it's very good for split definitions when they're having a problem with somebody, a lover, for example, who defines their split, which is why, of course, they're together. You know, that they discuss things in a public environment because that way the split definition gets a chance to find its own bridges. You know, so it can bring out its own expression of its wholeness. But that you can see right away with this child, when you say to this child, would you like to have this for Christmas? And the child goes, You know, the next thing is to say, well, let's check it out. You know, we'll wait a little bit, but I'll put that right now on the waiting list. Let's see what happens. You know, and you go out for a walk and you go to the park and you walk around in a public place and you come back with the child and you can say, you know, is that still what you want? And the answer is, you got it. There's frequencies. You know, the most fixed frequency that we know is the emotional frequency. We know with the emotional frequency it's a matter of time. The thing about split definition frequencies, it's not about time. It's just about the environment. If you're a split definition and you want to experience wholeness, just go into a public environment. That's the whole point. You know, then you take advantage of the bridges that are there by the auras that are provided. When you're dealing with an emotional being, the frequency can last forever because, after all, with the emotional system, there is no guarantee of anything absolute. There's only the potential of clarity. So you can get to 99.99.99.99% clear, but you're never going to get to 100% clear. And it may take you 99.99 years to get to 99.99% clear, and then don't matter anyway. So one of the things that we know about the emotional system is that clarity is simply a time equation. Some decisions deserve more time than others. Minor decisions, you can go emotionally an hour and make up your mind. But larger decisions can take much more time at the emotional level, because the more time you give yourself, the more perspectives you have within your wave, the better you are able to find the clarity for your decision making. So we have a child that's a generator. We have a child that's a split definition. We have a child that has 5 open centers that all have their own strategies. And then we're going to put this human being into a household with unaware, not self parents. We're going to send him to school with the byproduct of unaware, not self parents, with not self children and not self teachers. And they're all going to have a really good life. This child is a 1-3. If you come into the world and you're a 1-3, you know right away that if anything is going to go wrong, it will. I mean, you know that right away. Soon as you come in, you nuzzle up to your mother assuming that you're going to be able to get milk, and it's not there. You know right away you're a 1-3. It does not work. It's broken. I need help here. Right? I mean, it's just the way that it is. And the thing about 1-3s is that as a profile, they are the most self-absorbed of beings. Personal destiny, lower trigram, a personality that is absolutely convinced that the truth must be somewhere. And an unconscious that's absolutely convinced that that's all bollocks, that none of that is true, that the world is filled with nothing but error, mistakes, and failure. And so this wonderful child, who we already know day one has serious problems, on top of all that, has a 1-3 profile. Their mother's going to mess up, their father's going to mess up, they're going to mess up. The parents immediately are going to assume that this was a mistake. Only 1-3 children are told that by their parents, right? You were a mistake. The awake 1-3 smiles and says, right on, Well, I love them. You see, they're the only ones that keep everything going. You have to understand that. If you're looking at profile, you're looking at one of the most important genetic ways in which we can look at groupings. In looking at human profile, we get to see much more than simply personality traits as we can describe them through the numbers. But the reality is that we get to see geometry, we get to see the way in which we interact with the whole. But more than that, we get to see the value of each of those levels of contribution. 1-3s, because they're the beginning of the structure, they're the base of the profile structure. What the 1-3 teaches us is that we can never trust the propaganda of solidity. We can't. You cannot trust those ones that say, here's our foundation, because there's always a chance that they're full of it. Always. From the very beginning that I've brought human design into the world, I have been surrounded by 1-3s. And they have been great allies for me because they're the people that guaranteed that if I was full of it, they were going to find it. And God knows they tried hard, because this is their nature. You see, without it, we don't have evolution. Because, you see, the foundations do change. There's a big difference between Newton and Einstein. Foundations do change. And it's only because we have that as a very basis of our genetic nature is to understand that life is not fixed, it's not static, it's not stuck. that even when you start with what appears to be a foundation, underneath is this anarchism that says, hey, baby, this is not true. This is not true anymore. Time to tear it down. Time to build a new foundation. Time to move on. So the first thing about this child, when you have a child that's a 1-3, the first crime of the parent is to lie to the child. I mean, it's the most important advice to give a parent of this child. Don't you ever lie to this child. Ever. Ever. You know, so you say to the child, oh, that's great. You're going to lose your first tooth, and Tooth Fairy is going to come and stick money under the pillow. Hey, if there's no Tooth Fairy, your reputation is in the toilet forever. I mean, forever. You will never be trusted again, ever. Ever. You don't mess around with 1-3s. You don't, because they will find out the truth. Because that's their fate. You know, all these 1-3s who followed gurus. I mean, that's incredible, eh? Okay, today we're going to walk on fire, and because you have this consciousness system that you've learned from me, your feet will not hurt. Only a 1-3 burns their feet. You know, in the middle, they're going, you're full of shit, you know? And their feet are on fire. Because they're the ones that are going to find out, which isn't necessarily nice for them. It's very useful for everybody else. You know? It really is. You know, my favorite story is the hunter-gatherer story where you go out with a 1-3, you see some mushrooms lying there that you've never seen before, and you figure, hey, maybe these are good, and the 1-3 grabs it, eats it, and drops dead. You know, the other one goes back and says to the tribe, hey, Louis was very useful. You see these mushrooms? Don't eat them. And you know what 1-3s are for. You know, if it's going to break, they'll break it. But it also means that they can find out whether it can be fixed or whether it's totally useless. And, you know, it's one of the things to grasp about this child. So right away you know this child is coming in with certain very basic handicaps. And you know right away that this child is coming in with a deep unconscious pessimism. Third line theme. This is the worst mother anybody could have. You know? But I'm not going to tell her because I want to avoid confrontation and truth. And I hold on to things that aren't good for me because I can prove that I'm a good child and not be made a fool of. On and on and on and on and on. Oh, such a trap. I mean, such a trap. How cruel life is, eh? I mean, I know the game. Oh, it's cruel. I don't know how anybody makes it. You know? It's like when you look at it this way, you think, Jesus, you know? I mean, maybe it would have been better to incarnate as a daisy, you know? Something simple, okay? What are you giving me all this stuff? You know, I'm trying to have a life here. You know, and then they really make it tough because you've got to feed these things. You know, you got to feed them, you got to clothe them, you got to educate them, you got to protect them. You know, they've got to have cars, wives, husbands, dogs. It goes on and on. And then on top of all that, you say to them, look, you idiot, you're supposed to wake up as well. You know, because you're not just here to be an idiot. And another slab of meat that we're throwing into the grinder. Seems like they're asking a lot, eh? What to do. It's not easy. After all, without the mechanics, you can see that historically, ever since we've had the ability to be able to share any kind of deeper level of intellectual thought, that the goal has always been there, but the numbers have always been small. You know, the magic of our time is that with mechanical techniques, we can change, transform human beings. That's the real advantage. It's not philosophy anymore. I mean, if it was only philosophy and I had to describe that, I couldn't do that. I'd be crying. You know, it's like, Jesus, you know? Then you could nail me up on a cross and I'd sort of weep and, you know, feel bad for humanity. But I know that that's really the greatest of all jokes, is that all of that horror can be transcended quite easily. It really can. And then you get the other side of it. Because you see, that you know, I have to show you the horror. Otherwise you can never see the beauty. Or the potential of what the beauty can be. How sublime the mundane of awakeness is. How sublime the mundane of awakeness is. And it's one of the first things that you learn when you enter into an awake state, that life is nothing but life. There isn't anything important to do. There isn't anything important not to do. There isn't anything to do. There's nothing. You don't even have to think about it because it happens. You know, you breathe and you eat and people get older and days go by and, you know, at some point you disappear. And and the rest of it doesn't mean anything. I mean, after all, I don't want to think about all these things that don't matter. They don't matter. I like it here. That's all. I finally got to a point where I realized I just like it here. You know, the rest of it, I don't care. It's just a movie after all. There's characters in the movie, there's jerks, there's saints, there's this, there's that, and it's all kind of, well, all right. Yeah, this is good. It's just another day, another movement. It's so beautiful that way. You know, you get to see that it's a free ride. You know, the ultimate magic carpet. Well, it's really a free ride. It's beautiful. If you're not educated, you don't get there. If you can't educate your young, they will not get there, and that's the point. And then you have to deal with that layer upon layer upon layer. I haven't talked about the color and deep motivation of this child, their health system, their this, their that, their base. You can go down and down and down in all of these layers, and I haven't talked about all of these open gates and channels. Every single one of them is the enemy. To take this child away from its true nature. I haven't talked about the links between the split where this child salivates like Pavlov's dog. Can I have the other end? Can I have the other end? Can I have the other end? Spends their whole life. Can I have the other end? Can I have the other end? And even when they get it, they don't even realize that they've got it already and they're still going around, I've got this one. Can I have the other end? Can I have the other end? You know, I watch it every day. You know, you watch human beings and you see that they're just, you know, it's the great cosmic pinball game. You know, they're all fluttering around with all of this stuff going on inside of them. And they don't know what's going on and they're deeply depressed about it. You know, life is difficult. They don't make enough money. They got bad sex. They have this. They have that. They got all these things that are going on in their heads. And their bodies are sick. Yeah. It was a lot easier when you were in the womb. You know? No personality. No witness. You know? You didn't get across yet. Didn't have a purpose yet. Didn't have to come into the full form. Didn't have to stand alone in the wind. You know, it was real quiet in there. All you were doing is just going through these chains of forms. You know, all this nice, just building the package. You know. So wonderful to see a new car on an assembly line. However, if you buy it, it may turn out to be a lemon. You know, it's great on the assembly line. But the moment you put somebody inside of it, everything changes. See, the magic of what we are is that these personality crystals, they're incredible things. They're eternal. You've got something inside of you that's been in existence for 15 billion years. 15 billion years. It's traveled more in space than anything you can possibly imagine. And it's in each and every one of us. And the moment that personality crystal comes into the vehicle, that's the moment that you get to see what this is all about. See, that vehicle, that ride, that's really tough. The challenge is to make it easy. That's the challenge. The challenge is to take consciousness and fit it into form like a perfect glove. Ah, how wonderful that is. And you know what that's like? Have you ever met somebody and without having eye contact, without touching them, you know they're intelligent? You know this experience? You can feel things. Intelligence just isn't expressed out of somebody's mouth. It's in the way they move. It's in the way they feel as an aura. It's there. Everything about our experiment is to fulfill the goal of filling up this form with consciousness, not just the mind. That it's in your hands and it's in your touch, it's in your breath, it's in the way you see, it's in how you hear. You know, this is the magic, and you don't get to any of that until you are a pure, unadulterated, objective witness, which means you're nothing. You're nothing. I am nothing. Truly. I know the joke. There isn't even an importance for me anymore that there is a recognition that there's a witness that witnesses. I don't care. It doesn't matter. See, all of these things only matter when you're not there. They always matter. Success matters until you're successful. Then it doesn't matter. You know, it's just the way that it is. It's the way we are. Oh, and the not self torments you all the time. To be this and to be that, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be better, you got to be Yeah. Let's have a break. 10 minutes. And the way in which, as humans, we operate with many different forms. You know, you've already gotten to see that when we look at the development, our development within the womb, that you can already see that we go through many different forms. We go through 10 stages of development. We go through a trinary consciousness stage with the vehicle's relationship to the mother. Then we have the personality enter. We've got another form configuration. And then finally we have the birth. And yet at the moment that you come into the world, your body graph isn't the only aspect of your design. That there are other aspects of your design that are very important to you in this life. And I always have difficulty in cutting away the superficial spirituality of concepts and trying to bring them to a place of real clarity. To try to get people to really understand that we are one. And of course, the moment that you say that, you end up with a whole bunch of schmaltzy spiritual philosophy that gets dragged along with all of that. It is one of the things for me is that in the way in which I understand the nature of forms, it's always been obvious to me that the individual life, not only is it choiceless, but it's only an ingredient in soup. I mean, you know, it's not the soup. You know, it's not even the best part of the soup. You know, it's a molecule that's part of an aspect of the soup somewhere. Anyway, it's one of the things about awakeness is that what awakeness brings to you is that the arrogance that fear creates dissipates. There's an enormous arrogance in the unconscious. There's an enormous arrogance in the ignorant. It's an enormous arrogance. The arrogance that you're important, you know, that your life is important. The arrogance that you have to do the right thing. The arrogance that they have to do the right thing. And on and on and on and on and on. And at the moment that you wake up to the fact that life just happens and you're a witness of your aspect of that experience, all that arrogance disappears. It just does. It's gone. And the moment that arrogance disappears, you get to discover something. You get to discover that your individual life is actually only a chimera within a larger life that exists while you're living out what appears to be your mundane daily life. For me, the great joke is what happens to us when we go to sleep. You know, sleep's a great mystery. Right? It's a great mystery. I watch my dog neigh. You know, she's a sleeper. Right? I come into the house in the middle of the day, she's up like this, you know, on her back, legs in the air, totally wasted, you know, her eyelashes fluttering in her dream life, you know. I mean, she's only up 4 hours a day. You know, the rest of the time she's gone. You know, dreams are a strange thing. The dream rave, for us, for humans, there is a difference in the way in which we're programmed when we are vertical and when we are horizontal. And it's one of the basic things to understand about neutrino programming. Our crystals of consciousness are in a neutrino ocean. That crystal, as I described it to you yesterday, that has its one functioning facet, that through that facet comes an eternal string in the sense that it's always there, it's always going to be there, at least as long as there's a universe, as long as there's stars burning in the sky, that there's a string of information that is being processed by those crystals of consciousness. This is the program feed. Now, the way in which we receive our feed is 88 degrees. In other words, it sort of comes in like this. Whoosh. Yeah? So when you're a human being and you're in a awake vertical state, which means like us sitting or whatever the case may be, that what you're receiving is that you're receiving a vertical input. It's coming into you, it's coming in at an angle, it's coming into your crystal, it's being processed. Now think about it. Mammals, if you look at the design of forms, what you will see is that mammals, their design is this way. They have a horizontal design. You can also see that in mammalian design, because that's what the dream rave is based on, that in mammalian design that you only have a certain number of gates that are potential and a certain number of centers that are potential. Now think about what happens to a human being when a human being lies down. Or a human being is going to make love and lies down. Or a human being is going to rest and lie down. Or a human being is going to go to sleep and lie down. Or they're out on the beach here lying down. They look like this. They look like this. Our programming changes the moment that we go from vertical to horizontal. It changes. And we only get a certain feed. Okay. And the feed that we get is this feed right here. In other words, this becomes the matrix of what happens to us when we step into a horizontal state. Now, my purpose in this overview that we're going through in these days is not to go into any deep descriptive detail of this. There's material available. What I really want to stress to you, though, is something quite extraordinary about this state. When you look statistically at the awake human being, what you see is that the vast majority of awake human beings are energy types. Generators and manifestors make up approximately 80% of the human population. When you look at the dream rave, when you look at the horizontal human, what you get to see is that the vast majority are non-energy types. In other words, you get this huge population of projectors and reflectors. I happen to be a projector in my dream rave. You get this huge transition. And one of the most interesting things about this transition is that everything about the horizontal state is that in the horizontal state, we are actually more instrumental in the development of the consciousness field than we are when we're awake during the day. Because when we're awake during the day, most of us, because of baby and the way it's born, are useless. We are not here consciously serving the greater forces. As a matter of fact, we are desperately just trying to survive. And desperately just trying to get our shit together in this life. And the assumption that when you're awake, that you're making a real contribution is actually not true. It's a great joke. We do really good work when we're asleep because we do nothing. Absolutely nothing. We're really good at that. Really good. Nothing. And while we're doing nothing, we are being informed, programmed deeply, and not as energy types, as receptive, open, huge amounts of open centers in the sleeping vehicle. Everything open. Come and give it to me. Let me take it in. And so one of the things to recognize is that while you're running around in the daytime, trying to figure it all out, trying to get to that place where it works for you, blah, 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 that the truth is that when you go to sleep, you've got another form, and in that other form, it's a totally different process. Totally different. You see, we don't just simply come into these vehicles, and these vehicles are the whole story. We don't. This vehicle is simply the basis upon which, on the day-to-day basis of our lives, that we get an opportunity to recognize and fulfill our difference. When you're looking at a human design body graph, you're not looking at the whole experience of being human. You're not. What you're looking at is what differentiates us. And at the moment that you can see the differentiation, then you can find the strategy and authority for the vehicle. But it doesn't mean that in and of itself that's the whole movie, because it isn't. It isn't. You see, your design is a design that's going to integrate with other designs all the time. Your design is going to be in a partnership, or as we'll soon see, it's going to be in a penta. You grow up in a penta. You spend most of your life in pentas. You spend a third of your life asleep. In other words, you spend most of your life in forms that you're not even aware of. You're not. And there you are in your awake state saying, I'm in charge. This is my life. I know what I'm doing. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. Yeah. Sure you do. Sure you do. I have no idea about that. None. The whole thing about complexity, the longer I've been in this, I haven't stopped talking now for 17 years, and I could still keep on talking for another 17 about all the information that's here. And yet at the same time, being able to absorb all of that information doesn't help. It doesn't. It's really interesting. I like it. It's interesting. It's interesting to understand how things work. It's great. It's great. But the fact that you understand how something works doesn't mean you change anything. It doesn't. The fact that you understand how your not self works doesn't mean that you're going to conquer it. It doesn't. And that the very thing that allows you to understand it is the very thing that can't help you with it, which is your mind. Your mind says, hey, isn't that interesting? No, we're not going to do that. Hey, isn't that interesting? No, we're not going to do that. That's the mind. And that this very differentiation of the body graph is not there to say to you, look, this is your fulfillment. What the body graph is a driver's manual. It's a passenger manual. It says to you, look, this is the way you're going to be able to develop in the best possible way in this life. You're not going to understand what's going on in this state. But you also have to recognize that if you enter into that state correctly, the dream state, that what comes out of that is going to be of value. And this brings me to one of the basic tenets of human design and being truly differentiated and really giving yourself a chance. Have your own bedroom. This is one of the most important, mundane principles for anybody who wants to be awake. Sleep in your own bed. That doesn't mean you can't break that rule. And sleeping in your own bed doesn't mean you have to deny yourself sex or love. It means that when you're unconscious, be alone. It seems like a useful principle. Think about what happens to you when you're unconscious and you're not alone. Eh? Think about, you know, you have an open head center. Your not self is always thinking about things that it shouldn't think about, right? And then you sleep with somebody who has a defined head center. And you're both unconscious. And their head center is pumping into yours. And you wake up in the morning with more shit on your mind than you can imagine. And you have no idea where it came from. And you get up and you're wandering around carrying all of that stuff. And it's not like your partner wanted to dump that on you on purpose. You know, it's not on purpose. It's just a mechanical truth. You know, you're sleeping with your partner, you got an open emotional system, they're emotional, they have a bad dream, you get poisoned. I mean, think about that. They have a bad dream, you suffer. You know, you go to sleep with somebody with a defined spleen, you got an undefined spleen, and in bed that night as they go to sleep, their cold system emerges, you know? The flu. You wake up in the morning and you have it. Because you got it delivered. Let alone what the interference is in the nature of your design when there's somebody beside you and they're changing the whole configuration. See, my goal is to plant a seed of individual rights. You know, I can never go through a seminar without stressing how important it is that we establish individual human rights. This is not political rights. This is the integrity of every single human being. The right for them to have all of the basics in this life. But more importantly, the right for them to have an education that can liberate them. And out of one of those basic rights is the right to individual territory. Individual territory. It's one of the most important things. It is the only thing that is a true privilege of wealth. It's territory. And everybody has a right to that unique territory. And if you do not achieve that unique territory, you are never free from conditioning. Never. And you never get to operate correctly while you're unconscious. Sleeping in your own bed is something that is very, very important for a human being. It's one of the basic requirements if you are truly going to have a chance to be yourself. It's also something else to understand about the nature of what we are, is that you cannot truly appreciate the other until you can feel the other penetrate you. You know, when you sleep with somebody and you wake up with them, space, and you meet somebody who's coming out of theirs, you know precisely what you're meeting. Precisely. You can feel it enter in, you know, it's like the 57th gate, you know, the penetration of the wind. You know, this little soft breeze that just brings shivers to the back of your neck. Because you wake up. One of the first rules of waking up, you know, wake up in your own space. You'll find it makes an enormous difference in your life. So, my discussion here for you is really about understanding something about the way in which we operate. If we're going to operate correctly when we're unconscious, how the hell do we do that? You know, it's not like, you know, you get ready to go to bed and you say to yourself, all right, we're going to be correct in our sleep tonight. You know? I mean, it does, you know, none of those things work that way. You know, it's like all these people that try to teach people how to do things in their dreams and, you know, on and on and on. If you really understood what the dream program was like, you know, you'd stop being concerned about it at all. At all. The reality is that that whole level of programming has nothing to do with our individual lives, but has everything to do with the consciousness field. It's a consciousness field that we're taking in. Though, you know, those that are sleeping take in the conscious field of those that are awake. I mean, it's just an interchange of consciousness. And we are designed differently when we are horizontal, so we're designed to process the information differently, and we never get access to it. You know, it's not like you can interpret that from the dream language that you have when you awake from that state. And yet, you know, it doesn't mean anything. And I mean that seriously. You know, all you can do in this life in order to be correct is that you cannot try to be right in all of these states, because you do not have the ability to be right in all of these states. It's not a mental trip. It's not about pointing yourself in a certain direction. It's all about your form. Your form. Just the form. I mean, over and over and over again, I keep stressing how, you know, there is no other way. If I did not know my authority with my kind of mind, you know, what a hopeless, useless life. Because this mind, for all its beauty when it goes out, is useless when it's trying to tell me what to do. I know, I've been there. Useless! And it's not like my mind can prepare me for what I am in that sleeping state. I mean, it's a joke. When I'm asleep, I'm actually interested in the light. Which is really a joke. It's a good thing I don't know what the hell's going on. I'd be nauseous. You know, it's all taking place while I'm unconscious. And then I wake up in the morning and I've got my whatever and away I go. But it's not like I can do anything about that. The only thing I can consciously do about that is that I can make sure that I sleep in my own space, and I've been sleeping in my own space a very long time. You know, it's not something that I would ever give up. And by the way, that equation is more difficult for men than women. You know, men are usually neurotic when their women say to them, I don't want to sleep with you anymore. You know, it's sort of, they begin to go slightly mad and crazy and, you know, threaten their women with endless sex. Anyway. You know, the whole point is that it's not about those things, and it's okay, and, you know, I'm not rejecting you, dear. You know, I don't want to have anything to do with you when I'm unconscious. You know? And I mean, that's not an insult. You know? It's just like, well, you know, it's not like we're going to do anything. You know, it's all right. You know, when I'm conscious, I'll deal with you. You know, and it's one of the things to recognize about us. You know, there's much more things going on than we are consciously allowed to be aware of. You know, in this whole business of becoming yourself, it's so important that you treat yourself with respect. And part of that respect is that you give yourself an environment that is a holy environment for you, your space. You'll find that it's very, very healthy for you. If you're an individual and you're moody, you've got a room to go in and close the door. If you're an emotional person and you're having a shitty day, you got a room to go in and close the door. You got your own space. You got the integrity of your own environment. You don't have to deal with the other. And you can go through your own unique process. And at the same time, you can always open that door, and it's always a grace to be ready to accept and receive the other. You know, and then you know really what you're taking in physically into your life. The real joke is the penta. When we began, this is illustration 23. When we began, I talked about genetic imperative. When we were looking at the stages of conception and we got to that place of the sex wave and the establishment of the 59-6 and the capacity through the 59-6 to instill in us genetically our basic imperative, which is to make more. Everything about the nature of the penta, for me, the penta is one of the most extraordinary pieces of knowledge that I was given. And it's an extraordinary piece of knowledge because it goes beyond the dilemma of the individuated, differentiated self and takes us into the truth of how the actual organic development of consciousness takes place. In other words, none of us are on our own in this. It's not like any of us are given responsibility or treated with that kind of responsibility by quote-unquote the gods that we can handle this. As a matter of fact, all of us are directed in our lives by a force that we have no conscious access to. None. Now, the penta is the primary structure for life. It's the primary structure for life. And it is the primary framework for human life. Now, the moment that you have built into the fetus this genetic imperative to make more, and the recognition that when we bring this out to the illusion of our Maya, and that we see in the nature of our Maya that it is necessary for us to reproduce, otherwise our species is going to disappear, then you begin to see the profound impact of that process. In studies over the years where I've been teaching, for example, about the nature of the tribe and the body graph, how important it is to recognize that the moment that you have the capacity to make more, what goes with that is the binary in that structure. On one side, you've got the 59-6 that makes babies. On the other side, you have the 50-27 that actually intelligently devises a way in which the offspring can be nourished and educated and protected. And that we well know that given the human phenomena that our offspring are deeply vulnerable for 7 years. We've proven that statistically. It takes us a very long time to educate and protect our young. And that the way in which we can educate and protect our young is that it's necessary for us to have social bonds that allow for the protection of the young, and that there is time for them to develop. So that basically human beings, when they come together, when they couple, that there is all kinds of pressure on them to stay together. And then, of course, we get the famous 7-year itch, because it's basically a 7-year biological cycle. Every relationship that you have, whether it's a blood relationship, a love relationship, those relationships all have to be revitalized every 7 years because it's a cellular process. The moment that you have a child with somebody, there's a 7-year contract. Now, technically, at the end of 7 years, the child has been given enough that it could survive on its own. During the Second World War, after the war, there were studies done on feral children. Now, feral children are children in which, during the bombings or whatever, their parents died. They had nobody that they could rely on and had to survive themselves. And what they discovered was that if you were not at least 7 years of age, your chances were very slim. In other words, an age-old thing about the development of humans. So one of the things to recognize about the way in which we bond is that everything about life on Earth is built around the reproductive family cell. Has to be. Has to be. There is no other way for life to flourish on this planet. The way life flourishes on this planet is that human beings bond together in a contract, a biological contract, and in that biological contract, they bring a form into the world and they nourish it and protect it for a certain amount of time. Now, you can see in our evolution that basically now we do 3 cycles. It's very common now to see 3 cycles. You know, the children get to be in their 20s and people are already talking about, I'm finally free. You know, but I mean, the biological cycle is 7 years. Okay. But that also means something else. It means that the way in which life is generated on the planet, and it's a generative process, is that life is generated on a formula that's a 5. And this is how it works. The moment that you've got 2 people, what you have is a partnership. A partnership. So you look at, you got one person's design over here and somebody's design over there, and you put the 2 of them together and you see where they meet and so forth and so on. But they remain intrinsically within themselves in that interconnection. They simply can recognize where they impact on each other, and that they can impact on each other in a full spectrum of places within that graph. Now, we know that biologically there is an imperative to make more. That means that you begin with the first child. And when you begin with the first child, that gives you a 3. And the moment you have a 3, you have a penta. A penta is a mathematical configuration of human beings that is either based on 3, 4, or 5. 5 is the maximum. 5 is the goal. Think about it genetically. When you produce one child, the genes, they pat you with one hand and they slap you with the other. They say, okay, very good, number 1. Hey, idiot. 1 more now. One more. And I'm not going to let go of you. Hormonally, we're going to drive you crazy. You know. I mean, we're going to make sure that you really want to make that next one. And we're not going to let the pressure off until you make that next one. And you know, there you go and you make the next one. And now you've got 4. And everything seems kind of stable. And then the genes come in. And they say, look, what if one of the kids is a fag? We got a problem. I mean, what if one of them becomes a priest? We got a problem. What if one of them's got a low sperm count? We got a problem. What if one of them, God forbid, drops dead? We have a problem. Have another one. Insurance. Eh? If we have the insurance, the chances are that not only will we maintain the population, but we might actually get a little bit ahead of the game. And all the genes are happy. So the moment you have 3 kids, I have 3 kids, the genes have left me alone. You smile at me and wave hormones at me, and there's something inside of me that says, doesn't matter anymore, doesn't matter anymore, doesn't matter anymore. You know? Game's over, the genes leave me alone. But the reality is that until you get to that point, they don't leave you alone. And everything about us is framed on that pentastructure. Everything. You're going to spend the rest of your life ruled by pentas. You're a circle of friends, you're this or that. And it is this energy, and when you look at this pentagraph, what you're looking at is you've got a very, very limited field of activation. And the reality is that the way in which you actually live out your life is so limited in terms of the nature of your design. So limited in terms of the nature of your design. Everybody fits into pentas differently. Everybody. And when you're looking at a penta configuration, what you're basically looking at is the channels that run from the throat to the sacral. So what you're looking at is that you're looking at 6 different channels running between the throat and the sacral, and this is the penta matrix. And so human beings, us, you know, you got that body graph and you say, okay, this is me, this is my life. Wait a minute. Whoa. No. I want you to see what it means to be here. What it means to be here is that there are so many forces at work that you have absolutely no control of. None whatsoever. The direction that your life is going to take, the fulfillment of that life, your contribution to the whole, all of those things are going on and you blissfully don't know anything about it. Nothing. You don't know why you get into a penta and you can't seem to live out your nature because other people seem to be controlling you. That you seem to be moving in a direction that's not your direction. There are all these different forms in which we move in and out of so easily, breathlessly, as we move through our life. And it brings us back to the essential truths in human design. You cannot make anything out of all of this. You can't. I mean, amongst my students over the years, there are many really superb human design intellectuals who have mastered this knowledge at levels that I find deeply impressive. It's essential for us in a science like this that we have the ability to describe all of these various aspects of the knowledge. It's an essential ingredient to building the foundation of a science. But you know, living your life, who gives a damn? It's not going to do you any good to think about all of that. And understanding how limited you are within the context of the penta doesn't mean anything. I mean, think about it. When you take a look at this chart, you know, here is somebody, if you take a look at the lower right-hand side of this chart. Now, in design, you would be familiar with this as the channel that is 2946. This is the channel of discovery. This is the channel of succeeding where other people fail. Now think about this person. This person wants to make their individual contribution. This person is a generator that's ready to go through the whole cycle. And when they're there on their own, they're ready to accomplish everything in this life, because after all, they have to avoid confrontation and truth in order to prove so forth and so on that they're worthy and da-da-da-da-da and the whole movie that goes with that. Okay, now think about all that. Now think about what happens to them is that they're sitting with a group of people that they're going to be working with or playing with or having fun with, or that's just their family. And the moment they step into that, the first thing that disappears is their ability as a generator to enter into things as cycles. It's not there. It's not there. The moment that they're in a room with 3 or 4 people, it's gone. It's gone. I don't mean it's erased. It's just not in the mix. It's not pulled out of the soup. Now look at their open 4629. Now the open 4629, this is about dealing with the outside world. In the family, you have 2 responsibilities. The inside world, which is the order of the home, the cleanliness of the home, the rules of the home, the authority within the home, all of those things that are part of the inner life. The other responsibility in the penta is the outside world. It's okay that Daddy looks like Superman in the house, but if Daddy is not Superman on the outside, then the child becomes confused. In other words, we have 2 ways in which we raise our young. We show them the inner world. We offer them the outer world. Here in this design, when this person steps into a group of people, there's absolutely nothing in this person that's ready to go out into the world. Nothing. Now imagine this person hangs out with a lot of people that don't bring that. This person is never going to be in an environment that encourages it to go out in the world and do its thing and discover the experience of being there and doing it. And yet on their own, away from that, they're sitting within themselves. They're not self-mind rattling around. And they're going, hey, but I want to go explore too. You know, I want to see what that looks like. I want to go there. And the moment they step into that, it's gone. It's gone. So if they don't step into the right penta, they got a problem. And all pentas, by their very nature, are dysfunctional. We all grew up in dysfunctional pentas. Every single one of us grew up in a dysfunctional penta. All of us. That's why when you're in the embrace of your family, the way they see you seems so limited. Well, that's the only way they've ever experienced you. They don't experience anything outside of that unless it's a one-on-one. And then you get the taste through the partnership of what the other is in many different areas. But within the context, when I go back to see my family, it's so funny for me. The moment I step into my mother's house and my siblings are there and their children, I'm a lousy penta person. I mean, when I step into a penta, everybody else takes a shot and I'm just sort of there. You know, in my house, I'm the guy that washes the dishes and takes out the garbage. I mean, it's not like I'm a world teacher. You know, in my penta, I'm just another barking dog in the house. You know, and all of the stuff that's me never gets into the penta. You know, and my family runs my life. You know what to do. And they only see me according to how they see me in the penta. They don't see me any other way. They don't. It's one of the jokes. You know. As a matter of fact, in my penta, the only thing they see is that I managed to make money. You know, so that's what I'm known for within my penta. You know, can I have? Could I have? You know, and could I have it now? You know? Can I have that game? Yeah? Can I order it now? You know? I mean, in the penta, that's all I'm good for. You know? And that's how I'm seen. I mean, what to do? You know, it's the nature of being. If you're not in the right penta, you really got a problem. And you can't get into the right penta by saying, all right, all of you, let me see your charts. You know? It doesn't work. You know, it was like this crazy, crazy creature I taught years ago in Ibiza. I mean, in the early years in the 90s. And she had made up a chart that had all of the gates that she wanted that she didn't have. And it was on a transparency. And the moment she would see somebody with a chart, she'd go over to them, straight, put it down on top of their chart and say, "No, you're not for me. You know, walk away." You know? Hey, that's hard work. It's not about that. It's not about taking the information and saying, "Okay, well, I've got to work on this." You know, it's like the undefined ego person, and you say to them, "Okay, don't make promises. You don't have to prove that you're worthy." Now, isn't that nice to say that? How nice it is to say that. And you have that person who has spent their whole life being unworthy. I mean, it's their whole life, and they don't even like you saying that. Because they think you're shining them on. What do you mean I'm worthy? I've been a failure my whole life. What are you telling me? I'm worthy. Yes. You don't have to worry about it. And you know damn well that's all they're thinking about. I'm going to show him I'm worthy. I'm going to follow my strategy. I mean, it's so insane. You know, it really is. So insane. Look, the only thing that protects you is that you just accept that the mechanics will provide for you. That's the magic. For all our intellectual depth, for all our capacity to be able to go through and articulate all this stuff and blah, 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 in the end, there's only one thing to do. You know, you honor your strategy. You follow your strategy. It's mechanical. It works. And the longer you follow your strategy, the less power your mind has to try to insist that it's the thing that has to be in control for you. And the moment that you begin to pay attention to the not-self strategies of the open centers, you're going to hear it in your head every time you're trying to make a decision. It's going to be there, standing there saying, come on. Let's do it this way. You know? Let's do it this way. We've always thought this way. We have to prove ourselves. Don't believe that stuff. You have nothing to prove. You know, if we don't do this thing, they're going to punish us. If we don't do this thing, they're going to tell us we're bad. You know, on and on and on. It's the magic of being correct. The magic of being correct is so simple. You know, the magic of understanding all of this. Wow. That's a long, deep, complex movie. It's so much easier just to be able to be told or tell somebody, you know, you're a generator, respond, you'll see that life's better. Now get out of my face and go live your life. You know, and that's the end of it. You know, instead of 25 years of intellectual surgery. You know, I mean, one of the saddest things for me over the years is how many people hide from the truth while they look for it. You know? I mean, I have students that understand things that human beings have never understood, and yet they're not awake. You know, they're not. You know, because it's more interesting to just plow through the endless minutiae of the detail of this knowledge, because it's fascinating, but that in the end is not the point. I mean, you know, my goal in education has always been simply to solidify this knowledge as a science, not to turn everybody into, you know, deep wells of data. I'm much more interested in people just waking up, you know, and just following the mechanical strategies. So you can see what happens to us in the life. What I'm really trying to get across is that there's so many processes that are taking place in our lives that are far beyond our ability to control. You know, everything about my teaching has started with no choice. And, you know, people jump up and down and they pull their hairs out and they get all excited. You know, but the reality is that's the movie. There is no choice. None. Not even, you know, the people come like, no. None. All of that's bullshit. You know, this is a track. I love numbers and you know, funny examples. We travel at 485,000 kilometers an hour around the outside of our galaxy. Imagine traveling at 485,000 miles an hour, and while you're traveling at 485,000 miles an hour, you decide that you're going to get off the train. I mean, how do you do that? You know? I mean, can you get off that train? You can't get off that train. We do not get off that. Whoosh! You know, and there's the person saying, no, I'm in charge of my life. I'm going to go over here. 485,000 kilometers an hour, right? Make a left. You know, it's insanity. I mean, it's real insanity that people actually think that they're in charge of their lives. And they do. The not-self is there going, what do you mean? I have a choice. I had to listen to you. You know? No, sorry. I used to have this wonderful game with kids. Really annoyed them, you know, which is fun. You know, I'd put my hands out and I'd say, okay, choose a hand. And they'd sort of look at me. They'd choose a hand. And I'd say, see, no choice. And then they get really angry. What do you mean? I chose this one. Well, it's a straight line. I mean, if you look back, you know, the choice was an illusion. It's just an illusion. It's a straight line. Fast. I mean, if you want to be really precise in physics, yeah, eventually it curves, but we're dead before we get to the curve. You know, it's fast, straight, zap. And people are saying, well, there must be something I can do. You know, no, it's not true. You know, if you're caught in a river that's traveling at 485,000 miles an hour, you are not going to swim to the shore. You wouldn't even contemplate it. You'd be howling with fear. You know, that's a ride, eh? And everybody's trying to swim to shore. I want off, you know. I'm going to run my own life. You know, I'm going to make a tributary over here. There's nothing you can do. You know, this is the real truth. You're not, you know, there's nothing to do. There is everything to be. And it's just being, and it's not spiritual claptrap to say that, because it's just mechanical. That thing that's floating so fast down the river, you know, if that thing doesn't float properly, it's going to bang off rocks. It's going to get too much water in its mouth. You know, it's going to have a problem. It's all about being correct in the flow. It is the basic intrinsic value of life. We are all here in a 15-5 flow. We're all here to be in that flow. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you're operating correctly as yourself, it's not that all of a sudden all of this becomes aha. I tell you, the moment that you're floating down that river as yourself, you don't give a shit about all that. It honestly doesn't matter. If this wasn't my job and I wasn't selected to be a messenger, I wouldn't pay any attention to this. I have a great life. I mean, I got what I needed. That's the grace for me. I got what I needed. I live this life, and it's all okay. And I don't need anything else. I sure as hell don't need to know what's in this today there. And I don't need to pay attention anymore to whether I have this or that, or they got this or that. I don't care what you got in that sense. It's just life. It's all okay. No problem. See, my movie can have anything. In my movie, I can love, I can hate, I can kill, I can be killed, I can care, I can not care, it can feel good, it can feel bad, I can have pain, I can have no pain, but it's not me. I'm not responsible. I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to control it. I don't even know what I'm going to say. You know, I woke up one day and realized, you know, my whole life, I have no idea what's going to come out of this mouth. None. And I don't care. I mean, I don't care. It's unimportant. It used to drive me crazy. You know, here I am, this unconscious mind of mine, and all of a sudden there's you know, it's like, where'd that come from? And now I don't care. You know, it is what it is, and I see, and I've learned this is me, it's a trait, this is the way I work, I seem to babble. You know, and the rest of it doesn't matter. And it's not like I can change it, fix it. It's not like I can be anything other than what I am, and I don't know what I am because I only know moment by moment in my splenic dream. There's nothing else. And this is the most important thing to get across to somebody. Not in this language, but in the mechanical language. You know, it's not like you're saying to them, look, you got to study for the rest of your life, you know? I mean, it isn't. You know, it's about, look, you got a chance. Everybody's got a chance. Everybody's got a chance to live a better life. Everybody. And you can live a better life the closer you are to living it as yourself. That's all. And living life as yourself is not a complex thing. It's not. It's simple. Truly, in the end, it's just simple. It's a strategy. It's there. It's a joke. I don't know how funny that joke is. But the joke is you have no choice whether you follow your strategy or not. Now, isn't that a joke? I mean, I hate to kill the goose that lays the golden egg here. But please understand that. It's true. You know, you can be my friend, you know, and I give you all... Doesn't mean you're going to follow your strategy. It doesn't. It's not about a choice. There are no choices. It's all illusion. It's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. Oh, there are many people I know in human design who would really like to be awake, who figure they've earned it by now. You know? Hang on. You know, if you are not just being you, living out that, forget it. Forget it. You know, it's so simple. It's so basic. That's why it's important. It's transferable at the most simple level. You know, and it's the start for everybody. It's the start for every child. It's also something for you to understand. And I recognize and I am grateful for professionals who have studied this knowledge deeply, who are effective in transferring this knowledge to others because it's necessary. But at the same time, to really recognize that the beauty of the knowledge, you know, is just an extension of its simple basic truths. And its simple basic truths are what everybody needs to grasp. Okay, what I want to show you now, we move to slide 24, is that basically I want to talk about the 3 stages of life and briefly look at them. In terms of rave cosmology and in terms of the evolutionary patterns that we go through on the planet, with the discovery of Uranus by Herschel in the 1780s, we had a vast transformation that began to take place on this planet. Part of that transformation was the transition from being a 7-centered being, which was the chakra, the Hindu Brahmin system, and that 7-center evolving into a 9-centered being. Coincidental to that 9-centered being is a change in the life cycle. The discovery of Uranus changed our life cycle. We went beyond Saturn. We went beyond the 29-year, 30-year cycle. We entered into a new 84-year cycle. Coincidental to that discovery and to the advent of the 9-centered being is what we call the Industrial Revolution. And one of the basic elements of the Industrial Revolution is that it has and continues to raise the temperature of the planet. Many of my students know that I am a great supporter of global warming. I am somebody that loves global warming, and I wish the hell it would get hotter. And all of that has to do with the fact that this is about the nature of mutation. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, the planet has been warming up. And part of that warming up is so that we can digest different kinds of foods. All of this is interrelated.
with the advent of the Industrial Revolution came the development of more sophisticated forms of transportation, what ultimately has led to what we have now, which is the globalization of not only our economies, but our diets and so forth and so on. And that with the higher temperature, one of the things that took place at that time was a change in the human body temperature. We have been warming up. And this warming up is essential. It's leading to the mutation that's going to take place in 2027. This warming up has been the cause of the epidemic in both prostate cancer and in autism in children, because both of these things are related to the eventual transformation of our cycle into a new evolutionary form and the transformation of the solar plex center. From the moment that we had this transition, we entered into a new phase, and the new phase was based on having a different framework, a different time framework for our development. You know, when we were dealing with the Saturnian cycle, which was for most of our civilized development, that the half-life of the Saturn cycle, 15 years approximately, that by the time that you were 15 years old, you were already somebody that was married or bonded to somebody. You probably had children already. You had already been working since you were 7 or 8 years old. And that by the time you were 25, you were old, and that the life expectancy for most of the planet did not extend beyond 30. Now, we well know that with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, what came with that as well was the industrialization of healthcare, sewage systems, medicine, so forth and so on, all of these things leading to what ultimately is the expansion of the life into the Uranian cycle. Now, the Uranian cycle is 84 years, and the half-life of the Uranian cycle is between 38 and 44. Now, that's a very different half-life than the previous Saturnian. Most human beings, including those that are coming into the world even now, are being raised in Saturnian traditions and are not yet fully living out the Uranian phenomena. My father, for example, lived a Saturnian life. You know, by the time he was 15, he had to have it together. You know, by the time he was 30, he already figured his life was over, and it was torture. He had to live another 50 years. You know, the reality was that you had to be able to do everything soon. You know, so when you were growing up, if you weren't married at 18, there was something wrong with you. You know, I mean, there was something wrong with you. You know, you were going to be, if you're a woman, you were going to be a spinster for the rest of your life, and the family was going to be deprived of new blood. You know, you had to have your profession. You know, you already had to know at 15, you know, what you were going to take in university. You know, all of this pressure on the old Saturnian system. Now, I know that nobody is mature until they're past 40. Nobody. You know, this is just a very long, extended developmental period. So it's one of the things to understand about the change in our cycle. The change in our cycle has brought a different phenomena. Whereas in the Saturnian cycle, flowering comes early. Early. You know, the Mozart phenomena. Flowering comes early. Death comes early. In the Uranian cycle, flowering comes late. Death comes late. Now, that's a better formula, at least from my perspective, but nonetheless, you also have to recognize the pressures of that. The fact that one is not mature for one's first 40 years also indicates that the things that you get into in the first 40 years aren't to be taken as seriously as you thought. You know? It's really something to keep in mind. You know, because the second 40, it's a better movie, eh? This is the prana of life. Okay, now, that leads us to the mutation that's coming in 2027. Part of that mutative process is that this is a 6-line mutation. So every human being that's carrying a 6 line in their profile, so basically, you know, you're looking at 6 2s and 6 3s and 3 6s and so forth and 4 6s. You're looking at people that have a 6 in their profile, that all of these people are carrying a mutative force. And that mutative force literally divides the life into 3 separate aspects. And so there's 3 phases in the life. Now, the first phase of the life, and this is true to a certain extent for everybody, because obviously all of the six-line beings have a deep influence on everybody else. We're all living in everybody else's aura. So basically what we're looking at is that we have a new life cycle process. And that the first phase, the first 29 years, the first Saturn cycle, this is the phase of trial and error and pessimism. And everybody better be aware of it. So, my daughter who's in her 20s, I said to her, look, don't worry about anything until you're 30. That's all. Okay, done. Don't worry about it. Wait. Get past that now. It's not the old days anymore. Those first 28, 29 years are full of mistakes. This is the trial and error process. And one of the things we're going to see is that our educational programs have to change. And they have to change in respect of this. Yes, there's basic educational programs that are necessary to transform the potential of the infant, to give it the capacities it needs, reading, writing, arithmetic in their design, and social skills, and, all of this kind of stuff that they can get out of school. But the reality is that there are many things that can only be learned later. And that the first 30 years are really not times to make long-term commitments. It's not healthy. And it's never going to be healthy. The other thing is that if you operate correctly in the first 30 years of your life, you're going to have the best equipment for life. You're going to learn what you need to learn. You're going to get the right lessons. Even if things don't work for you, and there's all kinds of designs, even if they don't work for you, you're not going to feel cheated. You're not going to feel disappointed. You're not going to feel like, life has given you a bum trip. You won't. You won't. You will simply have learned what you need to learn. We have a very important transition that has been marked by this progression of discoveries as we move out. We lived for so long with Saturn being our limitation. And then suddenly in the 1780s, we get Uranus. Now, one of the most important discoveries we've had is that in the 1970s, we discovered Chiron. Now, Chiron's a marker. It's a marker. I don't want anybody to get on a long, deep trip with this Chiron. It's about the size of Manhattan Island. It's a rock, but it's a very important rock because it's a marker. It's like a beacon in the sea. It really lets you know something. And that marker is a marker that sits right between Saturn and Uranus. And both Saturn and Uranus tug on it all the time. Saturn has a 30-year cycle approximately. Uranus has an 84-year cycle. Chiron has a 51-year cycle. So Chiron is a marker of the end of the second phase of life. So you go from 0 to 29, first phase, Saturn return, and then you go from the Saturn return to the Chiron return, and this is what I call the interregnum, and this is known as being on the roof if you're a six-line being. And basically what this is about is that for all of us, this is the time in our life where material considerations are the most important and the most viable. Think about that. That's very important. It means that between 30 and 50 is your prime earning potential. This is where you're designed to set the foundation of your well-being for the rest of your life. And it's one of the most important things about this interregnum period. Now, this is particularly true as an archetype for six-line beings. Because six-line beings are really here to make their success when they're on the roof. They've moved away from subjectivity to objectivity. They moved away from pessimism to optimism. They moved away from being a follower to being a leader. And in that movement of follower to leader, in this movement from pessimism to optimism, from moving from subjective to objective, they begin to take advantage of what they learned, and in taking advantage, they can find their success. In other words, when we're developing people for the material market, when you're talking to people about their potential in careers or whatever, and by the way, I'm not saying people stop working at 50. What I'm saying is that the material foundation of life has to be set between 30 and 50. That this is the window for us. And it's there for a very simple reason. That beyond that moment of 50, when you enter into the third cycle of life, that's your time to flower. It's the most important phase of life now. Now. When my father was my age, he was waiting to die. He was always waiting to die. But when he was my age, he was waiting to die. He had just had a heart attack. He figured the end was near. You know, he was going to be frustrated. He would still live another 30-odd years. But nonetheless, that generation, that psychology, that Saturnian psychology, they would get into their 50s and they would look at all of that and they'd say, okay, it's over. And those of us who have reached that point, my generation, the boomer generation, who have entered into our 50s, we all still feel like kids. I mean, sometimes I think my children are often more mature than I am. You know, and when I look out of these eyes, it's like, oh, you know, I'm 12 or 13 or 14 in here somewhere. I don't really know what's going on. I still feel young in that sense. And I'm incredibly young compared to my father at the same age. He was an old man. You know, he considered his life, you know, he'd done his thing. I've got a lot of stuff to do. We're younger, we're healthier. You know, all of that stuff is the advantage of living in this new time, in this new cycle. One of the tragedy is that you can see my mother's in her 90s. And she has an apartment in one of these places where they provide medical care if you need it and so forth and so on. But she has her own flat. And she says it's incredibly depressing. You know, because nobody has anything to do. And they're just waiting to die. I mean, they don't have anything to do, and they haven't been doing anything for years. For years. You know, and in fact, they don't think that they're supposed to have anything to do. Because nobody has shown them that this is going to be one of the best times in your life. That you're not getting older. You know, you're entering into the best phase in your life, a time of potential fulfillment when you're beyond the demands of the material. See, when you're in form, you can never forget about money. You can't. You can't. It's one of the things about being in form. I say money, I'm just talking about material. The reality is, unless you secure your material potential, it's very difficult to flower. You know, if you're still worried about how you're going to look after the body, you're going to have very little chance for your spirit. You just will. And the real flowering for us is at the moment that you enter into the third phase of your life, when you enter into the Chironian phase of your life, your chance as yourself is to finally get to live out the purpose of your cross. The purpose of it. And this is the real magic. You get 50 years to handle the characteristics of your design. I mean, that's basically the movie. You get 50 years to handle it. Here are your characteristics. Here's your personality. Here's your design. Here's your not self. Here's your movie. Get it together. And if you get it together by the time you're 50, hey, now you can really live your life. And I tell you, my own experience, there is an enormous difference. And I'm not a 6'9" being. I'm a 5'1". When my Chiron came, it brought an enormous change in my life. And not only did it bring an enormous change in my life, but the last 5 years, I have been much more the Clarion, my incarnation cross, than I was before. In the sense that it has much more reach and much more impact and there's more success and so forth and so on. It's also an awful lot easier for me and the less I have to do about it. In other words, it's just a natural point of flowering, and I don't worry about making a living. You know, it's one of my jokes with myself is that as long as I can talk, my family will eat. You know? My days of worrying about making a living are over. You know, and the moment that you get to that place on the material plane, if this is the kind of path that you're on, you'll see that the flowering is something that's possible. And it's part of this whole movement for us in coming into form is the recognition that our first responsibility is to the form. It's the first responsibility. That's what I'm here for. I mean, I am a form teacher. That's what I'm here for. It's the only thing that I can tell you that is as absolute, essential truth and value to anyone. Is that the first thing you honor is your form. If you honor your form and you clean the windows, the light shines through. But the first thing you have to do is honor this form. And if you don't honor this form, all of this stuff, all of the stages, and the horizontal and the vertical and the pentas. I didn't even tell you about was. I didn't even tell you about bigger transpersonal configurations that really leave us no choice. I didn't talk about the underlying levels of an individual chart where you get down to the color level and you see that all of us have motivations that we have no control over that drive us in this life. That motivations are rooted in an even deeper level and it goes even deeper after that. There's all this stuff. And the only way that we can move through all of this is if the form is right. It's all you need. It's all you're ever going to need. It's the only thing that matters, is that you operate correctly as yourself. If you don't, well, you die, and you got to do it again. I mean, this is one of the common things about this process. Because the odds are against you. It's like trying to make money from a slot machine. When the odds are really against you. Next life. Because you cannot, through belief, through prayer, through psychological analysis, through psychotropic drugs, through gurus, you name it. You're not going to get there through all of that. You're never going to get through all of that as a minefield. That's an incredible minefield. Faith is not going to help you deal with the not-self. It won't. It can't help you. Drugs aren't going to protect you from your family's penta and what it does to you. It's not going to work. You can study 24 hours a day for the rest of your life. Nothing. It's other these holy characters, with their holy books, They're going through the same letters 85,000 times, waiting for the mystery to emerge.